Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Court Storm College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Storm Media Network. My name is Kanaye, and I'm here with my co-host Josh, and we got a lot to get into on today's episode. We've seen some of the biggest games of the college basketball season go down this past weekend and in the early parts of this week, and we got some big games for a huge Saturday slate to preview today, hopefully up in time for you guys to see on Saturday morning. The season's continued to be really great. We got a Final Four in February last Saturday between Michigan, Duke, Houston, Arizona. Those games were great, wire to wire, close games that had great finishes. And we're going to, again, give you guys our takeaways and preview some of the matchups to come, as well as a brief overview of the AP poll, as we always do. But before we get into that, we got a couple announcements to make. First, us here at the Court Storm, we are partnering with Phorm Fitness Supplements. And let me say, as two guys who are in college, we got to go to class. We got to do assignments. We got to record for this podcast. I got to record for the UConn podcast too. It's a lot to handle. We got to stay up. We got to stay awake, energized. And Phorm energy drinks, that's some of our go-tos right now. Keeps us up, gets us ready to record for all you guys to see. And let me say, I think what I value most about Phorm is how they prioritize both quality and transparency. You know what you are putting into your body, whether it's their fitness supplements, creatine, pre-workout, protein powders. They also got some really fire apparel that you guys can all check out in the link that I'm going to plug in the description box below to be able to view their full site and check out what they have to offer. Second thing, of course, as always, just engage with the content you see on this channel in any way you can, whether it's liking, subscribing, or just telling other people about the Court Storm. Everything goes a really long way with influencing the almighty algorithm on YouTube and getting more people to see our videos. And also be sure to turn on post notifications so you are the first to see our latest content. So let's get right into it, the AP poll, as we normally start with. A lot of movement in the top 10 this week. Of course, we had some big games last weekend, as I mentioned, to start the video. We see Duke move up to the number one spot in the poll this week. They are the number one team in America, following their win over Michigan in D.C. in the Capital Classic. I think they call that little.
Yeah, the Capital Showdown.
Capital Showdown. Thank you, Josh. Arizona moves back up to 2, following their win over Houston. Michigan dropped following the loss to Duke. Iowa State, despite losing to BYU last Saturday, did still move up in the poll. Houston dropped 3 spots. UConn dropped after their home loss to Creighton last week. And Florida is continuing to go on the rise. They moved to 5 spots this week. And top 10 overall, I mean, these teams are just so stacked. And we're subject to see some more movement next week as well with some of the losses that have already happened this week. But overall, I mean, the top 10, I think, it's there. And there's a lot of movement in the middle of the poll, too.
Yeah, it's a huge week for the top 10 in general. Top 1, 2 lose twice, actually. 3, 6, 5, 8. I think almost half, if not more than half of the top 10 lost this week, which I don't know what record that might take now, but it's finally the time where a lot of these Big Ten, not Big Ten, but top 10 teams start to break, and it shows when they play their hardest battles. Obviously, well-deserved. Arizona gets 5 first-place votes. I don't really know where that comes from, but I do respect their growth, and we'll talk about both of their big games. Michigan is fair for 3. Iowa State rises up. They did not lose, or they did lose, but they did not have a horrible loss against BYU. Houston drops 2, and that is a bit of concern. We'll get to that later. UConn obviously drops a game, and Florida rises a ton because of this, because they also didn't lose anything. I think this top 10 is pretty fair. Maybe I would have liked to have seen Nebraska rise into that top 10 with Illinois. I just don't really know. It's probably just where I put Gonzaga, just because I think they need to play that St. Mary's game for me to really decide if they're top 10 or not, but I'm fine with them keeping them at 9. Kansas had a rough week, but also a very interesting week, and we'll have to get into that as well. And then outside of that, St. John's at 15. That will probably change after this week, given their loss to UConn by 30. And then Bama was a huge rise, or 8 points, going from 25 to 17, expecting to continue rising as they compete for the SEC with Florida. BYU rose, probably won't rise after their loss to UCF. And then rounding it out, St. Louis will probably drop out. Vanderbilt might drop out, and Louisville will probably drop out, giving space for possibly Wisconsin, St. Mary's, Villanova, any team that really can. But there's a lot of teams that are really fighting for those last roles, and it's really who can lose the most right now, because a lot of those teams are losing a lot.
I love how you mentioned the Dayton St. Louis game just because for the love of, everything, I cannot find a way to watch that game. And that was the one game that I really wanted to watch that night. I think I want to say it was maybe Tuesday night that it went
Yeah,
down.
it was
It
just
was on
randomly on ESPN.
some, yeah, just some small ESPN Plus channel that I just somehow was not able to find on YouTube TV. So that is unfortunate. The illegal streaming sites also let me down regarding that as well. Nonetheless, huge win for Dayton. But yeah, I mean, the poll, I think overall, I'd say they did a fair job this week. And it is very much subject to change going forward, too, with the craziness that's already happened and is probably going to continue to happen this week. But let's get into some big game recaps now. We'll start with Arizona Houston, the first of the two Final Four-esque matchups that we got last Saturday. Arizona took home the win 26 in a game that I honestly did not really give them any credit for going into the game. I think this was a game that I highlighted as the one that Arizona I felt was for sure going to lose when they were undefeated for as long as they were. I think they got out to, what was it, a 23-0 start before they lost their
Yeah,
first game
yeah.
at Fog Allen? Yeah. Even considering that they were without Koa in this game, it's just incredible. I thought they honestly had no chance going to the Fertitta Center against Kelvin Sampson, who does not lose at home. And, I really didn't think they were going to be able to pull it off without Koa, but nonetheless, you got huge game out of Anthony Delore. So I think that was my biggest takeaway. He's been hot and cold this year, but on Saturday, he was hot. I mean, 22 points, shot the cover off the ball from beyond the arc. You got some better shot making out Jaden Bradley, where he's kind of struggled as of late. I don't believe he was the most efficient in the game, if I'm not mistaken, but he was able to, get to the line, get the paint touches needed. And the bigs did their job. I mean, Karshenkov was great for them. Krivas had his normal impact defensively. I thought Toby Awaka did a fine job in the, appearance that he had for Koa Pete in this game. And, Houston, I just think that Kingston Flemings, of course, is a bucket, but he's forced to take a lot of tough shots. I feel like that's a major thing for Houston right now. They just seem to find themselves in positions where they can't get a good shot early in the clock or midway through the clock, and they're forced to go into scramble mode with 7 seconds left, and they end up throwing up a prayer, usually from Kingston or Emmanuel Sharp. And I think, honestly, Emmanuel Sharp was a little disappointing for me in this game. I know he was able to get to the line, but I think overall he did not have a very good shooting day. And that's someone who you need to be able to consistently hit shots. And I've been vocal on this podcast before about how I want to see more from Miles Uzan. I felt overall, he's kind of had an underwhelming year. But I think Chris Sinak, the shot making you got from him at points of the first half and the second half, that little mid-range jumper in the short corner, I think that's something they need to look to go to more early and often. But I mean, hey, hell, I got to hand it to Tommy Lloyd, man. Great job he did game planning for the Cougs, and big time coming out with a win out of the Fertitta Center.
Yeah, there really is a lot to say about this one, especially considering that Houston did not lose a game at the Fertitta Center this season. They lost one last season to Texas Tech, very random loss, I still find, in my opinion. Houston in general has just been incredibly good, not just at Fertitta, but in the Big 12. They were winning the Big 12 as of last week, and they were doing very fine in general as a team looking to make it back to the national championship game. And then they honestly, dropping the game at Iowa State, not the worst thing in the world. That was kind of to be expected. They played better than I would have expected, and they barely lost. But coming home and playing against Arizona and not really having a chance, especially in the later half when they just couldn't really find a rhythm, especially when they just couldn't score at all at one point, is my biggest concern with a team that has otherwise looked great. This is still a team that can win the Big 12 for the third time in 3 years and could really make a claim for a national title the way they should have, and especially considering what they owe themselves to do. The problem is that this was a game that I really am still shocked that they lost, especially considering the fact that Arizona just wasn't looking good. They themselves had a home loss, a bad home loss, not a bad home loss, but they had a home loss to Texas Tech, and you would expect that maybe that goes into Fertitta Center, where Houston needs a bounce back win. They need to get back to it, and they just don't get that opportunity. And once again, it comes down to shooting, which I thought they got over that. I thought having Kingston Flemings and Chris Sinak and Emmanuel Sharp would get over the fact that their shooting has never been great, and it just wasn't there that night. And I don't really know what can change, because I thought the change was already there, if you get what I'm saying. Like, I thought they had gotten over this problem that plagued them so badly last year and every year now, and it's a problem that's really coming up now more than ever.
I think the thing that's most surprising for me regarding Houston is just the play you've got out of your returning backcourt from last year's national championship appearance team between Sharp and Uzan. I expected them to be a lot better than what they have been to be to what they have been this year, if I'm being completely transparent. It just the inefficiency from Sharp, I think the hesitancy from at times from Uzan. It's something that you don't like to see out of your veteran lead backcourt, and to have so much on the shoulders of Kingston Flemings, it's so hard to ask a freshman to go out and win you 6 games in a row and cut to be able to cut down the Nets in Indy this year. And the way it looks right now, unless something changes soon, it's going to end up probably being that way. And, I think Chris Knack, again, has had moments this year. I think he's in store for a fairly big run in the tournament. I think we're going to see Chris Knack, the 5-star potential that we all know he has and has displayed. We've seen glimpses of at points of this season, but nonetheless, you got to get more out of Sharp and Uzan, at least from a consistency and efficiency standpoint. But let's get on to the second major game of last Saturday's slate, Michigan Duke in the Capitol in DC. What a game. I mean, defensive masterclass on both sides, and Duke down the stretch. Let me hand it to Shire. I think he coached his ass off in this game. I mean, the plays he drew up coming out of timeout, specifically the one I'm thinking of, is when he was able to recognize that they're chasing Isaiah Evans over the top of every screen he set. So they coming out of the timeout, they set the slip screen for Isaiah where the Michigan defender goes over and then Isaiah Evans able to roll off the slip screen to go in for an alley-oop slam. And that was just a huge play at that point in the game. I think it was able to increase Duke's lead up to 3 or 4 points, I forget. And I mean, they got stops down the stretch. And you got an incredible play from Boozer. He definitely probably won National Player of the Year in this game. I mean, it was very far and had his award to lose regardless of the outcome in this game. And I think he's maybe even submitted himself a case to be the number one pick. Of course, we'll probably have a discussion about that to come very shortly. But 18 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists. I mean, that's what more can you ask out of your freshman Phorm, man? He's the real deal. He played great start to finish in this game. And defensively, Yaxel Lendeboer was at a loss for words about how good Cam Boozer is on the defensive end of the ball. I mean, outside of Cam, you got great play from your bench. Caleb Foster, who starts, I felt he had a solid game. I thought you got great defensive minutes from Dame Sarr. Isaiah Evans shot the ball well. Malik Brown, I felt, had his normal impact defensively. Kanaye, I think, he did a really good job neutralizing Yaxel Lendeboer in the second half, where Yaxel got off to a really big start, but kind of struggled in the second half. And then from the Michigan angle, again, Yax was hot early, but they do kind of force him to be in a position where he had to take a little bit more of the 3-pointers that he doesn't normally take as much. Obviously, Yax hasn't shot the ball as well since Michigan has gotten into conference play. I understand this is an out-of-conference matchup, but nonetheless, his percentages from beyond the arc haven't been as good as they were to start the year. And forcing Yax will take 9 shot attempts, I definitely think is a win on Duke's end from a defensive point of view. And Michigan's bench, we talked about how Michigan was probably the deeper team going into this matchup and how well their bench played again on the road at Mackey against Purdue. The bench was a no-show for Michigan. Their depth was not very, good. Cheddar, Roddy Gale, Trey McKenney, those guys were all a non-factor in this game. Elliot Cadeau struggled, clean game on the turnover margin, but he didn't score until Michigan was probably out of reach of winning the game. And Elliot, I don't know if Michigan can win a national championship with Elliot Cadeau as their point guard. I think he's a good facilitator. He's a pass-first guy. He does have turnover problems, and while he didn't turn the ball over really at all against Duke, he has limitations, man. I think there's another gear he could level up to, but at the same time, I just don't know if he's capable of getting to that point and being a point guard that can win you 6 games in March.
Yeah, that's a lot of points that I was going to say as well, especially the Ellie Cadeau part on can he lead a team to a national championship. I mean, he's definitely showing it more than he ever did in UNC, which is really nice to see in general, and he has had great games, but unfortunately there are limitations, and his ceiling was never really that high. He's a great point guard, but he's maybe not even top 5 in, I don't want to say the Big Ten necessarily, but like Braden Smith outscales him very heavily. Keen Wagler outscales him a lot. Like, there are going to be far better point guards in his own conference that can beat him to it. Jeremy Fears, for example, as well. So I really feel like as good of a player as Cadeau is, he might not be enough. but also at the same time, they might not need him to be enough because you can rely on the three bigs and other methods and the deep bench, which, yes, did not play a role, but probably would play a role in a rematch or in another game against another one seed of your choice, per se. And I don't really want to put Michigan down because of this game, because they could definitely win it, and they have still a number one KenPom, number one net, number one pretty much every stat line thing, and they probably will be the number one overall team. Maybe, unless they probably wouldn't, if Duke doesn't win any, doesn't lose any more games, and Michigan doesn't lose their game to Illinois as of tonight's recording. But that's a whole different story in my mind. I still think that Michigan could and probably should be the number one overall seed. Regardless of that, though, this is Jon Scheyer's best game of his entire career. And I don't mean that lightly. This is his opportunity to win a national championship right flat in center. If you can go toe-to-toe and beat probably a better team than you, in my opinion, in a neutral setting. I get it was closer to Duke than it was to Michigan, but it's still a neutral setting. And you won that game in like mid-February, where there's still a lot of games left to play. There's still some time left, but you're showing a Final Four national championship form already. That's great. And especially great when it's more than just Cam Boozer. And I don't know if you highlighted him, but Dame Sarr is the guy I really want to talk about. He was undeniably great on the defense. He just reminds me of Juwan Roberts from Houston in his prime. He was well talked about. I remember us very, very, very highly talking about Dame Sarr being a huge piece on Duke's roster. He hasn't really played the way I was expecting on offense, but he's definitely excelled and probably overexcelled, in my opinion, on defense. And I think that's what really makes Duke a strong team, because the offense wasn't crazy for both teams. It was pretty much a slugfest, but they won the slugfest against the best defensive team in the country. And what does that make for a team like them, when considering that Cam Bruce is probably player of the year, when you're considering that Isaiah Evans, Caleb Foster, Pat Nagamba, they've all leveled up as players in general. They've really shown how good they can be. And then, seeing some growth out of Kamania mid-season, and Caden Boozer, who probably should lay off the three ball a little bit. He's just not been shooting it well there in general. But I think this team is really coming into its own. And I in a rematch, I probably would pick Duke again. I honestly feel like they win that game, but it's probably rock, paper, scissors between these 3 1 seeds that we've mentioned so far. And I don't really know how it's going to end up at the end of March, but it really does come down to who gets to play who, because we're seeing right now, at least from this week and from these 2 matchups, that anybody can beat anybody, but it does take a lot to beat the other team right now, because there's just so much going on and so many players that really matter.
After this game on Saturday, I think Duke is probably now, for most people, the favorite going into the tournament to win the Natty. I just think that the only thing that's probably going to hold Duke back going into the tournament is the inexperience of one of their players, and of course the faults of Jon Scheyer that we've seen over the past couple tournaments, with just losing NC State, losing the fashion you did to Houston just last year in the Final Four. I think that's probably the only thing that ends up holding Duke back. And I mean, I just think there's so many different looks that they can give you offensively, defensively. When they have it going defensively, they're just so hard to score on. They have positional size at every position. It's very similar to last year. And for my money, I think this year's team might be more well balanced than last year's. I, again, just think that maybe you don't have the experience that last year's team had in some of your veteran guys. Like, you don't have a Sion James. You still have Malik Brown, but still, nonetheless, it's a lot more on the weight of your youth, I should say. But still, Cam Boozer, I mean, just the impact he's had for that Blue Devils program this year, undeniable. And he's head over heels the National Player of the Year right now. And you might as well ship him the award right now on Duke's Senior Day. But let's get into the next game that we want to recap. That being Houston's trip up to Fog Allen on Big Monday. Bill Self remains undefeated at Fog Allen on Monday with his 41st win, 69-56. The Jayhawks take home the win. Probably the best game of the season for Trey White. I mean, he start to finish was incredible. Darren Peterson was a little inefficient. We definitely want to touch on Darren Peterson. I'll let Josh talk about anything that he wants to take away from the game before that. But I thought you got good minutes out of Bryson Tiller as well. Melvin Council, I thought, had good stretches of the game, although he's a little inefficient, as he kind of normally has been over this run that Kansas has gone on. In Houston, again, it just really comes down to, I think, the inefficiencies of Emmanuel Sharp. Emmanuel Sharp cannot buy a bucket in this game. Miles Uzan was not really a factor. JoJo Tugler didn't do all too much on the offensive end, though it's obviously not his calling card. And I think Houston should look to Mercy Miller a little bit more. I think I would like to see him get some more minutes for Kelvin Sampson. I feel that he's played really hard in the minutes that he is given. I understand he's not the most talented offensive player, but I think he makes a lot of big momentum plays that would, I think, lead to Houston coming out of these games with some better, outcomes. I think that, again, Mercy, I feel, is deserving of more minutes with how he's played and the minutes he has gotten recently. And I think you just need to get more out of your depth. Isaiah Harwell, I'd like to see play better than how he has recently. Chris Sinak, I think there's more that there's a lot he's leaving out there, and I think there's definitely another level we could see Chris Sinak get to. Khalifa Sacco, I'd like to see more out of when he is relieving Joseph Tugler. But nonetheless, big win for Kansas. Fall Allen, man, that place is something on Big Monday.
Yeah, it's once again a more of a story for Kansas than Houston, but also a
Yeah,
story in the fact that there's a problem with Houston. Houston, we
yeah,
have a
Houston, we
problem.
have a problem.
It's really, really entertaining, but also concerning because once again, this team has just not found a rhythm, and it got worse. I don't understand what happened in these three games for Houston in full, but they went from nearly beating Iowa State, which would have completely changed the directory of their season. They probably could have been a one seed for these two losses. Then they lose at home to don't worry, a great Arizona team, probably the best Arizona team we've seen in quite some time, but still a loss you probably should not have gotten. And then you get blown out at Kansas. Don't get me wrong, they're probably going to lose this game, but that is the largest loss they've had in quite some time, probably since they joined the Big 12, not thinking about it. And, they obviously won last year at Kansas. It was a very different Kansas team from that time around. But even then, this was a game that could have been winnable, especially considering the fact that Peterson didn't even play as well as he could have played. And we'll get into Peterson in just a moment. I know you guys are clamoring for that talk. Everyone is. But in my personal opinion, I don't know where Houston goes right now because they need a reset game, and they'll probably get that because they're not going to be playing this horrible schedule of at Iowa State, home against Houston, at Kansas. They're probably ending off their season with a less worrying schedule. I think they play Colorado at home on Saturday, so they can get bounce back games. But going out of the regular season, that's what really worries me. How are they going to possibly win that Big 12 tournament and maybe guarantee a 2 seed? Because they could slip to a 3 seed right now if they don't win it or don't do as well as we think. And then in the tournament itself, can they stand up to a 1 seed? I don't know if they can beat Michigan. I don't know if they can beat Duke. I don't know if they're going to handle other 2 seeds if they play them in a Final Four. Like, can they beat a Florida? Can they beat a Purdue? Like, we're getting to those points now where it doesn't feel there's no confidence in it. There's no general idea. I like the point of Mercy Miller, by the way. Just want to point that out there. He's really grown on me recently in these past few games, but I miss a guy like Terrence Arsenault who
Yeah,
played so well at the position that Kelvin Sansom gave him. I kind of wish he was here right now, and I wish Juwan Roberts was here right now. If Juwan Roberts was here, I think the defensive problems would be gone. I think the problems that have really been undermining this team, because keep in mind this team is built off of defense, and their defense isn't running anymore. The defense that we all know Houston has is not as good as it used to be even earlier in the season. And we've said this before, and we'll say it again. The Houston that you saw in November is not the same Houston now. Personally, I thought that is a beneficial sign, saying that Houston would get better, not worse. But there's still time to change. And like I said before, that is a horrible schedule. I think most teams probably go 1-2, 0-3.
right.
There's very few teams that could do that, but Houston was a team that I felt could have. And I think that's the biggest point, that Houston had opportunities to win all 3 games, and it got worse every single time in their opportunities to win. And it's going to worry me if they don't change that mentality, especially on the defensive side. But I think let's get into the Darren Peterson talk if you want to start on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I just really quickly circle back to Houston. I still believe in the ceiling of this Houston team this year. But then again, at the same time, it's the end of February. I mean, March begins in 2 days, and the way I thought it was going to play out has not played out in that fashion. The freshman is why I believe this Houston team has another level to get to. But when your returnees have not played to the level that you expected them to, again, kind of going back to Sharp and Uzan, then it's a lot to ask your freshmen who, honestly, outside of Flemings, have not really made that leap that me and Josh both thought that we were going to see in the middle of the year and at the early stretch of the year when Houston dropped that game on in Players Era. It's going to be tough sledding. I mean, it's a tough 3-game, 4-game stretch that Houston just had to play through. And if you're going to get the losses out of the way, might as well do it now and get hot at the right time. But they desperately need to get right game. But yeah, let's get into the Darren Peterson talk. Biggest takeaway for Kansas might be that Darren Peterson played 30 minutes in this ball game.
Yeah, listen, in a way, it is great seeing Peterson play more. And after his fake sub out at what was it, Oklahoma State?
Oklahoma State, yeah.
Where he dropped like nearly 20 in 18 minutes and then just didn't play the second half. He could have had a 30-point game. He could have changed a lot of narratives, could have cemented the story for him being a 1 seed right then and there. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. The conversation continues. People start building up this talk about Debance is looking great. He's playing every goddamn minute at BYU. He's literally winning these games, especially the Iowa State game. That was a huge point on Debance, especially now that Saunders is out fully, and it's pushing him in that scenario. Cam Boozer is doing great. He's having some of his best games of the season, winning the better games. I get it. Caleb Wilson's out, but when he wasn't, he was dominating, beat Duke. Like, there's a lot to say in general about the players around Darren Peterson that have really been, I would say, stepping up their games because they know he's not playing. And it's getting to that point too. Like, NBA fans that don't pay attention to college basketball are starting to pick it up. And that's not a good sign because that's going to trickle up to NBA executives. I do think most of them will probably stick with the original assumption and pick him up even if he didn't play a single minute the way forward. But I'm very worried going ahead on where Peterson puts himself. I get it, his health matters more than anything else right now, but a winning mentality should also be put on the table right here. And it feels very awkward at times because we're having this talk about, is Kansas a better team with him on the court or off the court? And it showed in the Cincinnati game. By the way, we'll cover it like very slightly on this too. Cincinnati, unranked team, probably not even a tournament team, goes into Fog Allen on a random weekday, actually, no, I think it was like a Saturday, beats them by like nearly 20 points, largest home loss to an unranked team in 53 years. And Peterson played almost a full game. He didn't look good. He didn't look good at all. He had probably one of his worst games. And it showed when, I think there's a picture of it too. There was a timeout. And Peterson's standing at half court, even beyond where Cincy is, and everyone else in the middle, everyone else just like huddled around Floyd Benunga, as if Peterson is not allowed in, or if he doesn't want in. And the chemistry problem might be bigger than we think then. If that is anything of the case, it might not be just injuries, it might be chemistry. Because if you can't play with Peterson and you think you are better without him, good luck winning a national championship. Because I do think that, yes, Kansas without Darren Peterson is actually a good team. Beat, Arizona at home. They played well on the road in some scenarios. They did well at Players Era, don't get me wrong. But Peterson puts this team from Final Four contender to a national champion and then some. Like, this could be a memorable ride for the age that Peterson plays, but it really matters. Like, it really does matter on how he plays, because he just can't be doing this whole subbing out thing or trying to make himself stand out in any other way. Like, I don't want to put it on him as a blame. He's still a young guy. He's still working it out, but it just doesn't look good from a media standpoint. And I'm sure he doesn't really mind that. It's not really his place, but it does matter for drafting. He wants to be a number one pick. I'm sure everyone would expect that, but his competition's growing. And there's a point for Debance to be number one right now. I don't know if I'd pick him personally, but I think there's a point if Peterson doesn't play the way he needs to and not just play 30 minutes. I want him to play 30 minutes and play effective, good ball, the way he started the season with.
These are all very fair concerns about Darren Peterson, where his draft stock stands. But at the same time, I've not seen a single mock draft service have him going lower than number one. And for my money, I would probably still select Darren Peterson number one if I am an NBA GM. I think a lot of that is just Yes, his health I do think is a fair concern. From what I know, I think a lot of the stuff he's dealing with in the knee or the calf, the whatever it is in his leg, it's something that is not completely fixable without, from what I heard, 2 to 3 months of just rest. So that obviously does not help when you're in season. That leads to some of the cramping issues and some of the early exits that I think we've seen this year. Bill Self has refuted every claim that Darren Peterson does not care about basketball and that a kid lives in the gym. Darren Peterson himself says, yeah, I said in an interview that everyone has had to say something about me since I laced it up in Lawrence. So at this point, I just don't really care about what people have to say about me following games. And you mentioned, I mean, the chemistry, that's definitely a real concern. Dick Vitale, most notably, said that he thinks Kansas and Darren Peterson need a divorce. And I don't know if I'd go as far as saying that, but because I do think they are a better team in terms of big picture and trying to make a Final Four and win a national championship with Darren Peterson than they are without him. But still, that is a major concern. If it appears that at times Kansas does play better without Darren Peterson than they do when he is on the floor. And yes, I think him being able to play 30 minutes is one thing, but I love the point you brought up about how it needs to be an effective 30 minutes where he's facilitating the ball, he's scoring efficiently, where honestly, the last couple games, even with some of his scoring totals, he's not shot the ball super efficiently. I think he's forced a lot of tougher shots compared to how effortless it looked for him at points of the earlier points of the year. But for my money, I still would take him number one. And, you know, if you want to call it the event of the week, I did see that a lot of people believe Darren Peterson was trying to sub himself out after making a three against Houston in that game this past Monday. But from what I know, Bill Self was just telling him to get back on defense and get a stop on Kingston Flemings, who had scored the two previous possessions. So, you know, it's a very polarizing subject in college basketball right now. And if you're thinking from Darren Peterson's perspective, he probably thinks, okay, you know, I'm going to go number one. Let's not risk me getting hurt, but let's play enough to the point where I'm influencing and, you know, helping the team, leading them to wins. But at the same time, it hasn't always shaped out that way. So it's tough. You know, I don't exactly know where I fall on the spectacle, but I still would think Darren Peterson goes number one in the draft this summer.
It does come down to that as well. And I do feel like for all social media's sake, we might be overblowing it.
Yeah.
But from a college basketball standpoint, we want this to happen. We want Darren Peterson to play more minutes if he can. And I do hope he can. He's been playing more and more recently. It's just that a lot of these games haven't actually been as good as we've been expecting them to be. He has good moments. I think the Houston game was a good moment, if you're going to ask me. But he needs more of those, especially as time goes on, because the season pretty much for the regular season is almost over. They have one important game this weekend going to not Arkansas, to Arizona, where that's a big one. If Pearson plays well, that could really mean a big difference between a 3 and a 2 seed for them. And I don't really know if that will really matter at the end of the day. But in general, I really do want to see Peterson play as many minutes as possible in both the Big 12 tournament and in the NCAA tournament, because Kansas can win a tournament. They can win it with Peterson. They cannot win it without him. It is simple enough, is flat right there, and it probably won't mean anything at the end of the day for the number one overall pick, but for fans like us, now's our chance. So let's cross our fingers and cross our toes and hope this all blows over and that Peterson plays as much as he can going in.
Love the points you brought up there. Really hoping we see Peterson lace up for every game the Jayhawks are in the tournament. But let's get into the last game that we want to recap before we get into some quick previews for the games to come. That being last night on the day we are recording this, Thursday's game between Michigan State going on the road to Mackey to play Purdue. Michigan State took home the win 76-74. Really just an all-around game for Michigan State. And man, I'm starting to worry a little bit from a Boilermakers fan perspective. I mean, the Boilers, they've lost every single ranked game at Mackey this year, and that's something that you don't typically see in the Purdue's illustrious history of playing at Mackey Arena.
Yeah, I don't even know anymore. Like, it's really killing me because we have 0 ranked wins in Mackey. I don't know the last time that's ever even happened in my time at Purdue. And I've been here for 3 years. I've seen so much. And I know in the past, even that's unreal. But you look at our ranked wins and they're all on the road. They're all on the road. And in a way, I can get over Iowa State. I can get over Michigan. I can get over Illinois. I can't get over Michigan State. That's the first time Michigan State's won a game, by the way, in Mackey since 2014. 14. And that's not to put down on Michigan State or to put up on how good Purdue has been in that time, but this is just an unreal loss at a such an such a bad time. If Michigan State had lost that game, it probably would not matter. They're probably going to get a 4 seed regardless, maybe a 3 seed if they do well in the Big Ten tournament. But Purdue, that was their probably their last chance to get a 1 seed. They would have had a great quad 1A win. They could have walked into the Big Ten tournament. They probably didn't even need to win the whole thing, and they could have ended up as that last 1 seed. Now it's like they got to compete for a 2 seed with a loss like this. And I'm not saying this is a horrible loss, but this is a win in my book, in my opinion, and it should have been a win. And it really just comes down to a lack of, I think, accountability in my personal thing. And it's not putting it on Braden Smith for not taking those shots they need to. And hey, congrats on 1,000 assists. Is 60 so away from breaking the record all time if he can do that. But my big issue is he's just trying to find the open man. He himself is the open man. He needs to make himself more open and more available for shots, because I like sending it to Meyer. I like sending it to TKR and occasionally Fletcher Lure when he actually learns to play the game again. But I really feel like this team lacks an accountability, and it does start at Braden Smith. As unfortunate as it is to say, I am concerned about him leading this team going into March, because they did well that last year when he did do that. They nearly beat a national championship bound Houston in the Sweet 16, and they can very well do that again and probably beat that team. But my biggest concern is just, is he going to keep playing this game where he tries to be the facilitator and not the shooter? Because there are times where he needs the ball hog and actually shoot more shots, because he is a better player than 10 points a game. Like that's kind of where I'm getting at, because I don't want to throw it on a guy like Fletcher Lord who just he hasn't had the best season, unfortunately. TKR's had a good season, but he hasn't had last year's season. Oscar Clough has been a motorboat at times, but he's also been like a steamboat at times. He doesn't really move the way I was expecting him, and he's not a crazy good defender. And the wings only do so much, and Daniel Jacobson's still a young guy. Like there's a lot of kinks and cogs that are just kind of coming together, and it works great on the road for whatever reason. But in Mackey, in a time like this, it's just not the game to drop.
Yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, this was a bad loss at a bad time for Purdue. I mean, at Mackey, at home, this is a game you should win against a Michigan State team that has their offensive faults. But I just think that kind of goes to show. I mean, before we start recording today, me and Josh were kind of talking through some of the flaws I've seen with Purdue as of late. One of them being defensively, they're just not there. CJ Cox is head over heels their best defender, and really their only true athlete, too. I think for the last 3-4 years now, Purdue has lacked athleticism in their starting lineups. And when you only have one true athletic guy out there who, of course, athleticism is definitely tied hand in hand with defense, it's tough, man. Daniel Jacobson, he's letting Carson Cooper take him off the dribble and dunk on him last night. That's something that just cannot happen. You need bigs who can move their feet well. And for being honest, Jacobson's not there yet. I think he could get there at some point, in years to come. But Oscar Clough, like you said, he moves like a steamboat. He doesn't move as well, nor is the player that I thought he was going to be coming into Purdue from South Dakota State last year. Braden Smith has height limitations. Fletcher Lawyer is not an athlete. It's tough to be a great defensive team when you don't have athleticism. I think that's a position Purdue finds itself in, as well as how they don't really have much shot creation. Braden Smith is your only true creator. And when your only true creator is too unselfish, the way Braden is, where I think last night there were several opportunities where he probably could have gone up with a shot, could have gone for a layup, maybe taken a mid-range jumper from the elbow, which he loves so much, and he passes it off because he thinks he can hit a guy in stride, ends up turning into a turnover, or just a bad miss, which you could pretty much chalk up as a turnover if you wanted to. And with the way Fletcher Lawyer shot the ball as of late, yeah, it just seems to struggle from beyond the arc. It's going to be tough. I mean, I think Braden needs to, like you said, talk to length about it. I think Braden Smith needs to look to be a little bit more selfish and take some more of these shots. I mean, I think back to the game against Houston tournament last year. Houston was the best defense per KenPom, and Braden Smith gave him, what was it, 30? Was it 35? He
Yeah,
scored.
I think it was.
They need that version of Braden Smith going forward. I think Braden Smith has March legend written all over him. I mean, that performance he had against Houston last year, of course, is up there, but I think he could definitely replicate that going into this year's tournament. And yeah, they need to go on a run. If I'm a Boilermakers fan, I'd like to see you guys win out the rest of the regular season, go on a run and potentially win the Big Ten tournament, and then try to position yourself to get to a at worst a 4 seed. I mean, ideally 3 at worst, but you don't know, and you want to have you want to be able to dictate what region you're playing in. I think that's going to be a major factor for Purdue, just because I don't love how they match up with the current 1 seeds right now.
Yeah, there is that concern in general, and I think that could also, in a way, apply to Michigan State. I don't want to necessarily put them on them because this is a great win for them. And I think the biggest thing I could take from Michigan State, which probably should have more takes, but we'll save it as just this, is their offense. Their offense kicked up, especially in the second half when they really started to show off how well they can play, not just in open space, but in the 3-ball. Jeremy Fears, Kurt Tang, they're actually good 3-point shooters, especially Kurt Tang. I'm really glad that Izzo used the portal well. I think Tang is from the portal, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Like I'm glad Izzo is starting to understand the portal well enough to get guys like Tang, and he's really coming into fruition. He is kind of taking more of a role since Vince Iwuchukwu is out, if I'm not wrong, for the rest of this season, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. But there is obviously the concern about them not having much shooting, and that will always stick with them just because we've seen that so many times. But right now, they have the win against both Illinois at home and Purdue on the road. That's a really good resume for a team that wasn't necessarily looking that good going into conference play. They still had Michigan on the road, which is a game they can very much win, especially now given what we've seen from them in Mackey. And I think it really does depend on how good Jeremy Fears played, because he's been less Grayson Allen-y, if you want to put him like that. He hasn't been as annoyingly bad with causing like flagrants or just being like pushy on the ball. He's been playing more fair, and the game has been coming to him easier. We're still expecting to see things from Cohen Carr, Carson Cooper, Jackson Cole. Like those guys are all playing exactly the way I expect them to play. But I think it really does come down to how well can, I guess, Fears and Kurt Tang shoot the 3-ball, and how well can Jeremy Fears himself play. Because if he's going to get inside himself and play this fidgety game, then he's not going to lead to a win for Michigan State. But if he plays the way he played against Purdue and to an extent against Illinois, Michigan State has a great shot at making a Final Four. They were, dashed on last year.
I definitely agree with you. I think a Final Four is definitely in the realm of possibility for Michigan State and Tom Izzo going into this NCAA tournament this year. It's going to come down to shot making. If they can replicate how well they shot the ball last night against Purdue without Divine Iwuchukwu, Trey Fort hasn't even got it going yet. I don't know. It's pretty late in the year, so I don't know if we'll ever see Trey Fort get it going. But nonetheless, I mean, for Kurt Tang to be consistent, he's capable of having big shooting nights. I think back to the Champions Classic where he shot the cover off the ball against Kentucky. They need more of these types of shooting nights from Kurt Tang, as really the only true shooter in their starting lineup with how traditional they are. Jeremy Fears, I think, needs to continue to look to be aggressive on the offensive end, scoring wise, and continue to do what he's done facilitating. And I think just you need to get big time play out of Kohler and Cooper, which they've gotten for most of the year. I am curious to see more of how they play going forward. I think their second matchup with Michigan when they're going to the Chrysler Center is going to be a big telltale sign of how they're going to be able to handle some of these 3 big lineups that we see some of the top teams around the country have, like a Michigan with 3 bigs, Arizona. They're able to beat, if they can beat a Michigan go on the road, then that completely changes everything for me in terms of how I view Michigan State going forward.
It really does depend, and I am really curious because this might be Izzo's last real year or like real season. Keep in mind, we don't really know about how this team will play out after here. Like he could totally go back to the portal, get some guys. This is Cohen Carr's junior year. This is still a young Jeremy Fears Jr. He's only a sophomore, but the growth we're seeing from these guys could mean something not just for this season, but for next season, especially if they show it, not just in the Big Ten tournament, but especially in March Madness, because this is a 4 seed that really is starting to look better and better as time goes on. And I'm very excited to say that.
But now let's get into some previews for this weekend slate. On Saturday, arguably the biggest game of the day, we have number 11 Virginia going to Cameron Indoor Stadium to take on the Duke Blue Devils, who are the number 1 team in the country right now. who do you like in this game? Because I think common sense tells you Duke's going to win, but with how good Virginia has been, granted, against a weaker ACC conference this year, they do have a chance to do something really special here.
I don't really. I will say this: Virginia, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, is a three-loss, seventh-ranked team in their first year with Ryan Odom, and I'm so happy. It's gotten to the point where like I think Tony Bennett went to a game and was shocked that they were playing
Yeah.
offense. That's
Dude,
insane.
he looked like I mean, dude, that might be the second event of the week. It looked like Tony Bennett could not stand the sight of seeing Virginia basketball score over 80 points. Like, I mean, I don't know the last time we've had a season where Virginia's been this good offensively. Probably going back to their national championship team in 2019.
I know they're honestly playing as not as good, but almost on that level.
Yeah,
And this could be a game that gets them into a 3 seed spot, if
right.
not even higher. And keep in mind, they're still in competition to win the ACC. They have just the North Carolina loss, and I think they and the Virginia Tech loss. That's all they have. They have two losses. Duke has one. This would be the head-to-head. This would be probably for ACC 1 seed. I'm not saying they can't do it, but like there's definitely a possibility. I'm gonna be real with you. It's Cameron Indoor on a Saturday afternoon at noon. I don't really know. I really would be more than surprised if they did, but it does depend a lot on both Jonah Grunlow and Diz DeRitter, especially Diz DeRitter. Diz DeRitter, I've talked about in the past. I haven't talked about him in quite some time because we haven't really had a conversation on Virginia, but to keep up with you, he's really grown as a player. He's averaging, I think, over 15 a game now.
16.
He really looks good. I honestly wish he was that, possible first round pick that we were seeing from him. He still could go to the draft, but he'll probably end up staying another year. Hopefully that continues with Virginia, given how good they've been. But this could be his magnum opus with Grunlow, with Ugana Nyoso. So that is a big three that can contend with Big Pat, with Boozer, with Kamania, with Dame Sar. There is a level of offense to them as well. I am a little bit worried about how undersized Chance Mallory is going to be. In this scenario, he is under 6 foot, so that's probably not going to benefit them in general, but he's played more of the part in general. And as a 3-point shooting team, they are one of the best in the ACC, possibly even better than Duke when it comes down to it. I would say Duke wins this game. I wouldn't say handily just yet because this might actually be their hardest challenge. And yes, they do still play North Carolina at home. That might be a harder challenge even without Caleb Wilson in that game. But I really feel like Virginia is a sneaky dark horse team and they've been that team for a while. And we're finally going to see them play like a harder team because they played the North Carolina, they played the Virginia Tech, they played like the bubble teams and the decent teams, but they haven't played a real contending team this year, and that means a lot considering they've only had 3 losses. So we really get to see a lot of Virginia. And for Duke, it's same old, same old. Defend Cameron Indoor. Make sure you're that number one overall team at the end of the year and keep chugging on.
Right. I'm so excited for this matchup between Thies DeRitter and Cam Boozer. I think Thies DeRitter has a chance to be able to win this matchup by the ability he has to step out and hit the 3-point shot. Granted, Cam can do it too. And I still think Cam probably wins this matchup. I think Cam is just a more physical player. He's going to get what he wants on the offensive and defensive glass. And I think his post moves are just a little bit ahead of where DeRitter's are. I think guard play is going to be massive in this game. If Virginia can get big time guard play from Malik Thomas, Chance Mallory, like you mentioned, though he is at a little bit of a height disadvantage, Sam Lewis, I think Jakari White has shot the ball incredibly over this run that Virginia's gone on. They have the pieces to be able to do it, but I still think, again, when Duke is rolling defensively, they are impossible to score on. And while this Virginia team is miles ahead better offensively than where they were in years past at the end of the Tony Bennett era, they still are only 20 in adjusted offensive efficiency on Ken Palm. So they're still they run a little stagnant at times. I worry that if they're in a position where they need to take tough shots, that's definitely not going to be a winning recipe in that scenario at Cameron Indoor. And I expect Duke to win, and I think there's a fair chance that Duke wins by a sizable margin, but do not be shocked if we get a Thies DeRitter, Malik Thomas legacy game here, and they pull out one in Cameron Indoor.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely one of those games I'm looking forward to. And considering that this is Virginia's last big game of the season, I think it could mean a lot more for them. And it probably does mean a lot for them, especially like I said before, they could win the ACC. if they beat Duke, which is just crazy to say out loud.
Yeah, but let's get on to the next game we want to highlight that is going down on the Saturday slate. That being number 14, Kansas, in the return game of the season series, going to Tucson to play number 2, Arizona. Arizona, of course, suffered their first loss of the season at Fog Allen. Does Arizona come back and get revenge against the Jayhawks in this game?
Yeah, this is one that I have been looking forward to, especially since that game at Fog Allen. And we mentioned this before. It really does depend on Darren Peterson, because with Darren Peterson playing even if he doesn't play 40 minutes, if he plays 30 minutes and has a decent game, maybe scores 20 on somewhat good shooting, I think they can beat Arizona. Texas Tech did it, and Texas Tech lost at home to Kansas. You can use your transitive values there. It's not a 1-to-1 exact, but I definitely could see Arizona falling to a Kansas team trying to get, like I said before, a 2 seed with a win like that. And for Arizona's sake, it's a lot like Duke and Virginia. Just keep chugging, hold on to that 1 seed, don't drop this game, defend McHale, just make sure Kansas does not sweep, because you got to get revenge on a team like that after destroying what could have been the most magical undefeated season of all time. And that excludes Miami, Ohio. We still have to talk about them at some point. I really do feel like, in my opinion, this is the revenge game of revenge games for Arizona. This beats anything else that they've played this year. They must win this game. And I think we're going to see a great showing from anybody of Jaden Bradley, Anthony D'Orso, Kopi, I think, returns. So he should probably have a great game. And I'm glad that Arizona has been keeping it strong without Kopi as well. I think it's been a really important part for their offense and their defense, and I expect it to stay up in the same. I don't know. I think Arizona, like I said before, probably wins this game, but they're gonna make it close. The Jayhawks are gonna try very hard for this one.
Oh, the point you brought up about how vital Darren Peterson is going to be to Kansas potentially winning this game. If everyone remembers correctly, Kansas beat Zona without Darren Peterson. Arizona hasn't gotten a chance to get a look at Darren Peterson on the game floor against them just yet this year. Darren Peterson can come out and work the magic he has at points of the year when he is playing and on the floor and being effective. Arizona could be in a tough spot. I think Melvin Council and Trey White, they did a tremendous job putting pressure on the rim with how they were able to get downhill, take guys off the dribble on Arizona. And Bryson Tiller, I think he's going to be a pivotal factor in trying to draw the Arizona bigs out of the paint, like Kopi, Karshenkov, Mo Krivas, Toby Awaka. That's what he did at Fog Allen. That's a big reason why Kansas was able to spring out to the lead that they were able to take on Arizona late in the game when they made that comeback. Now, I do think that Arizona is going to come out motivated. Like you mentioned, Jaden Bradley's a big reason why Arizona could potentially win this game. I'm excited to see him challenge the defensive backcourt for the Jayhawks, and I think there's a lot of added motivation considering how Jaden Bradley struggled down the stretch against the Jayhawks at Fog Allen 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks back now. And Anthony D'Orso, we mentioned at the beginning of the video, he's been really hot shooting the ball lately, and I would like to see that continue if I am a Wildcats fan. Now, Tommy Lloyd, not a great track record against Bill Self going back a couple years now, but still big time chance to really assert Arizona being back. After they suffered the 2 losses so far this season. I think that if Arizona can get back on track and win this game against a marquee ranked opponent, then Arizona's national championship case is right back on the table. And a lot of people are turning to Michigan Duke right now. I think Arizona's still right there, and I think Saturday they're probably going to come out, win this game against Kansas, and prove it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot once again to say about this, especially given, like as before, this is a big 1 seed opportunity for Arizona. I don't think they could even get a 2 seed right now, given how incredibly good their record is. And they'll likely be number 2, number 3 at the end of this week, especially if they do win this game. But it really does come down to how much they want it. It's a weird way to say, because I can't put it on a single player right now for both teams, but it's how much does either team want the higher seed, because you're going to want a higher seed right now, given the fact that I really feel like the 7 and 10 seeds are probably stronger this year than the 8 and 9s. And that feels kind of weird to say right now. We can get into that in another discussion. But I really feel like if you're going for that 1 seed or that 2 seed, you don't want to play a strong 7 seed or strong 10 seed. You want to play that kind of weak 8 or 9 seed right now. And I think that for Arizona in particular, that really matters. And this is pretty much the cementing game. They win this one, they've locked up a 1 seed, and they possibly have locked up the second highest one seed, especially once again if Michigan loses at Illinois tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the seeding is going to be crucial for so many teams this year, and just I think more than ever, this is a tournament that is so matchup oriented with how the top teams around the country are constructed. You need bigs to that can shoot to be able to pull the three big lineups out of the painted area. But just to highlight a few more games going down on Saturday that we want to just touch on briefly before getting out of here today. Alabama, Tennessee. This is a game to determine who is the likely second best team in the SEC this year. Alabama has been a lot better, honestly, since Charles Bediako was ruled ineligible. Baron Philon has been great, as he has been throughout most of the season. Nate Ament has gotten things going. Jacoby Gillespie's played a lot better than he did to start the season. I'm excited for this game. Do you think Rocky Top is going to take it home, or do you think Bama continues the roll they've been on?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we saw this matchup play earlier in the year. They were both actually, I don't even know if Tennessee was ranked at the time. Both had their ups and downs, and this has been a really up and down season for Bama, by the way. And they lost that game to Tennessee, got unranked, started playing good again, had a insane double overtime win at home against a still very good Arkansas team. I'm not going to hate on that. And they pushed themselves all the way up to 17 in the AP poll. They are still a top caliber team. They can make a Final Four. It's a battle of LeBaron Philon versus Nate Ament. I think that's a pretty simple one right there. I guess you could probably throw in Jacoby Gillespie and Holloway as additional like Robin pieces, but Ament's really coming to his own. I think he went from a guy that might not have been first round at the start of the year to a easy lottery pick, maybe even top 10, the way he's been playing recently. And yeah, Tennessee also can probably make a Final Four. They're maybe not as good as they were last year when they had a 2 seed, but this is a team that can grab a 4. And I think both are probably competing, like I said before, for that seed, maybe a 4 seed line. And I do feel like Florida's probably locked up the number 1 spot in the SEC and possibly a 1 seed if they win the SEC title and tournament. But that number 2 is still incredibly important. We've seen how important it is to be top 3 in the SEC as of these past few years, and I really do feel like this is the deciding game now that Vanderbilt's really fallen off and Kentucky hasn't been there and A&M hasn't been there. It's really just down to those 2 teams. And for Bama's purpose, I think they kind of need this win more than Tennessee does. I get it that Tennessee is the lower ranked team and their resume isn't as good, but for Bama's sake, they're a team that was sitting on a lofty high ground very early in the season. They beat St. John's in the Garden. They beat Illinois in Chicago. They had this insanely good resume. Their only loss was to number 1 Purdue. They were looking like a 1 seed. And things have really changed since, unfortunately, for Bama's sake. But they can get back really on the closest to the next best thing as a trail. And like I said before, get a 4 seed and push the envelope, because we've seen Bama as a underseeded team do well. That 4-seeded Mark Sears team from 2 years back, or I think it was, yeah, they made a Final Four and played very well against national champion UConn. Last year, they probably could have got a 1 seed. They had a really strong SEC, got a 2 seed, almost beat Duke in the Elite Eight. Like, this is still a high quality caliber team. It's not Mark Sears' team anymore, but Philon has grown so well, and I'm really interested into how this team grows. We're going to ignore the Charles Bediako part of this scene for Alabama, but I think the most important part to take away from this is that Bama needs this win more than Tennessee, and they honestly have a higher chance of going farther with a win like this. And this is not to hurt on Tennessee, by the way. This is not to hurt them.
Yeah, I completely agree with your point there that this is a must-win game for Bama. It's definitely going to tell us a lot about where they stand right now, SEC-wise and nationally. But speaking of the SEC, Florida, Arkansas, I'm picking the Gators to win this one at home. I just think that the Florida front court completely outmatches what Arkansas has to offer in that aspect. And I will say, though, the one way Arkansas can win this game is if their backcourt goes nuclear, a.k.a. Darius Acuff going for maybe 30+. But listen, Darius Acuff, there's a real argument to be had that he could be Calipari's best guard that he's ever coached in college. And he's just played so well. I've seen him be on the leaderboard for National Player of the Year rankings. Of course, that's boozers to lose, and you might as well give him the trophy right now. But I think there's a way Arkansas can win this game. I don't think Florida's backcourt is the best defensively between Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan. But nonetheless, you got to make shots, because if you're putting shots up and they're not going down, that's just going to play into Florida's advantage with how good they are on the offensive glass and the defensive glass. And you're not going to get many second chance opportunities if you're missing shots. So you got to get good looks, and you got to convert on them. That's the only way Arkansas wins this game. And man, I prepare that Arkansas front court, because they're in for it going to Gainesville tomorrow.
It's a small game to talk about. I do feel like Florida probably trounces Arkansas. Much as I do hate to say it, but I do think there's a possibility that A-Cup gets another crazy game, and we have a wild one, because Florida has looked great, and they probably won't be stopped, but Arkansas needs a win. They almost got it in an insane double overtime loss to Bama, and I just really wonder what Cal is thinking personally, because I'm not sure if you noticed this, Kanaye, but Cal's been playing a 7-man roster. I don't understand where that's coming from. I get it, his freshmen are very talented, and his team is very strong, and they did well against A&M earlier in the week, and they're gonna do well against teams like that, but you need more than a 7-man rotation to beat Florida. I don't care who it is. You need more than 7 guys. And he has 7 guys. Like, I'm just so impressed that they've even made it this far with a team as benchless, I guess you could say, as that. And I just don't know. I hope maybe that only mattered for that scenario, but I really feel like it's going to just be, Malik Thomas, Darius Acuff, and DJ Wagner try and take down this ungodly good Florida team right now, and they just get pummeled because there's no bench for them.
Yeah, you need depth to be able to beat the Gators. I mean, the Gators, they have Urban Clavzar, who's an outstanding shooter when he's on. Micah Hanlogton is a guy who maybe has NBA upside, who also comes off the bench for them. And when your rotations only goes 7 deep, as it is in Cal and Arkansas's case, that's not really a winning formula against a team as deep as Florida. But last game that we want to preview before we get out of here today, potentially the last time we see this WCC Classic matchup. Gonzaga Bulldogs take the trip over to Moraga to play the St. Mary's Gales. Really excited for this, and I'm sad that this could potentially be the last time we see it if they don't match up in the WCC tournament this year. Gonzaga has already won at least a share of the WCC regular season championship. And I mean, they're going on the road to what is sure to be a hostile environment against a likely tournament-bound Gales team with Paulus Moraskis, who's just been an incredible player this year. I mean, I don't think he's gotten nearly enough attention in terms of what he deserves for how well he's played on the offensive end of the floor this year. I'm excited for this game, man. I really am excited. Gonzaga's game just a week ago against Santa Clara was a great watch, and if this game against St. Mary's is anything like that, then I think we're in for a really, really great WCC matchup.
Yeah, it's a, I don't want to say do or die for St. Mary's. They did blow the rails out of Santa Clara and secured themselves that win. And I do feel bad a little bit for Santa Clara. I want that 3-bid WCC. That sounds so fun. It can still happen. It once again depends on how well Santa Clara does in the WCC tournament, but I think they probably will end up making it. But for, St. Mary's sake, they're on that 8-9 line. And like I've been saying every single time now, seeding is really the big mattering point. You don't want to be an 8 or 9 seed this year. You don't want to play Michigan. You don't want to play Duke. You want to be that 7 seed and play the Illinois, the Purdue, the Nebraska, whatever 2 seed lines into your pockets. And St. Mary's can get a 7, maybe even a 6 seed if they really push the envelope and win, which would probably be, I think, their only quad 1A. I think they have a quad 1 from St. Mary's, but maybe a quad 1A win against Gonzaga. And for Gonzaga's sake, I don't really know if this does mean too much for them, just because they probably don't go up or down too much on seeding, but a 3 seed's probably where they're going to be at regardless. It's just, this is the last time we're going to see this rivalry for quite some time. And I didn't really want to bring it up in that light, but the way things have been recently with conference realignment, we're seeing a lot of these, not smaller rivalries, but rivalries that have been around for so long, you kind of forget about them, that have gone away. Like Oklahoma State used to be a huge deal, and now it's not even a big deal in college football anymore. And it's barely a deal in college basketball, unfortunately. But St. Mary's Gonzaga it's a very old tradition. It's a great tradition. It's been one of the better traditions that we've seen personally, and it's typically a great game, a ranked battle, like all that you can put in there. it's done after this game.
Yeah.
Like assuming that unless they play, they probably will play one time the WCC championship game, and outside of that, it's done. And it sucks because unfortunately, and maybe things do change. Maybe St. Mary's does join the Pac-12 in that light, but we're removing a great rivalry, and I hope that regardless of who wins, it's a fantastic game that everyone remembers. Simple
Right.
enough. I hope we see the stars shine. And I hope we do see great games from guys that have just been down on their luck, especially on Gonzaga's side. Graham Ike has not been looking like himself as a reason. He has shown up better, but without Braden Huff, this team just misses a whole aspect to their game, and you're losing a big piece. And I do hope that does change in general. But in my humble opinion, like I want to see a great game from him. I want to see a great game from Paulus Morauskas, from Joshua Dent, who had a great game against Santa Clara. Like I want to have these things happen because I don't know when that's going to happen again. I care for
Yeah.
tradition as a fan. I want to have a game to remember. This is going to be the last time these two Titans brawl in what will likely be the last good year for the WCC for quite some time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I really do hope this is a neck to neck, wire to wire classic match between the Gales and the Zags. It is sad that this is the last time we're seeing one of these teams travel to the other to play each other, with Gonzaga joining the reformed Pac 12 next year. I honestly might pick the Gales to win this one just so that the Gales can hold it over Gonzaga the last time in this rivalry's history that they took home the win against the eighth ranked Zags. And just with how you mentioned the struggles of Graham Ike and how, I think the loss of Braden Huff, it's still not super aware of his timetable for return. But nonetheless, he's struggled lately slightly. Tyon Grant Foster cannot seem to hit a shot as of late. So, I think the Gales got him in a vulnerable spot right now. I might pick them to win tomorrow night. But I think that's pretty much going to take care of everything we have for you guys on this episode. If you stuck around to the end, please engage with our videos in any way you can. Super excited for the Saturday slate. I think it is probably the best Saturday slate to finish the season until we get into the conference tournament play. And super excited for the matchups to go down tomorrow. And we'll definitely have a recap next week out to you guys for the games that will go down. But until then, we'll see you all next time.